This show is listener supported. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 4, Episode 19, Janet. I'm your host, Haley Radke. This is Part 1 of our two-part Season 4 finale. All season long, we have explored a variety of different relationships, from different parental figures to being a parent ourselves to relationships with maybe an ex-spouse. We have covered all kinds of things that I never anticipated talking about. And it's just been such a treasure trove of insight for me, and I hope for you as well. Now, today's episode is a little different because I don't want to give you any spoilers. My guest is Janet Weinreich-Keall, and she's going to share her really shocking and unbelievable story. But I just wanted you to know a couple things about Janet before we get started. This is a very strong woman, and her persistence in searching for answers for 21 years is incredible. So you are going to hear her fierceness and strength throughout her story. And then next week, we are going to have two other special guests with Janet, and we are going to have a discussion about relationship. So I will tell you more about that when we reach the end of our interview with Janet today. But for now, I just want to let you know everything we talk about today will be on the website adopteeson.com. And let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Janet Weinreich-Keall. Welcome, Janet.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I've been following your story. I'm sure lots of our listeners have been following your story for the last couple of years and maybe even longer, but I'd love for you to have an opportunity to share with us your story.
Yeah. I tell you, Haley, this story has just blown my mind at times. I still certainly have moments where I go, wow, is this my life? Like, is this my life, really? And then other days I go, okay, yep, check, done, so let's get into it. So I was born in a small town below Alaska in Prince Rupert, British Columbia on October 13th, 1977. And I was abandoned the next morning. From there, I went to an orphanage where I was drugged and neglected. And then I was adopted by my parents, Gordon and Geraldine. And actually, up and until I was 38 years old, that's all I knew. Interesting to note is the exact day that I was taken home to start a new life with Gordon and Geraldine, my biological father, who had no idea about my existence, and my biological mother were there in that town that day, and they were together, right? So, I mean, it's just wild. So I had a great childhood in many ways. You know, I had very loving parents. I had siblings, one that was adopted as well, and two that were biological to my parents, Gordon and Geraldine. However, like many adoptees can relate to, from a very early age, I was very curious. And I was also very confused. And not only that, but from my time in the orphanage, I also suffered from reactive attachment disorder. So essentially, it really hindered my bonding with my adoptive parents for many, many years. You know, when I was about 8 years old or so, I really went into quite a funk. I look back on it now and see lots of shades of anxiety and depression. And really what it was really I was at that age where I was starting to go, okay, wait a minute. I was adopted, but I wasn't just adopted. I was left on a doorstep. Like, who does that? I mean, what? Like, what's wrong?
Yeah, when did you find that out?
Yeah, so, my parents told me from as early as I could remember, but I have a glimmer of a memory when I was around 5 years old, and I would sort of say, oh, tell me about the lady that left me. Tell me about the lady that, put me on the doorstep type thing. And of course, gave me a very age-appropriate response. It was a bit fairy tale in nature, and that's fine for 5 years old. But of course, as you grow up, you recognize pretty quickly that it's not a fairy tale, right? So I certainly started to recognize that. And then, of course, as you go through elementary school and you meet other kids that are adopted and stuff like that, you start to say, oh, well, were you abandoned too? And they just kind of look at you like you're crazy. Like, what? What are you talking about? Like, who's abandoned? And I'm kind of going, wow, yeah, well, me. So, I recognized from a very early age that my story was quite unusual, especially to happen in Canada. And I felt really quite alone for a long time. Like I kind of felt like I was dropped out of the sky and here you go, fend for yourself. Which is really interesting because I really did have a good childhood, of course. But again, this is what a lot of adoptees can understand. It's like, okay, great, you can have all your needs met or whatever else, and you can have people who love you, but it never really fully resolves the loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trauma. So yeah, so my teens came along, and I think just like most of us in our teen years, it can be very interesting, and mine certainly was. I really kind of felt like I woke up one day and I was just really angry. I just thought, how could this have happened to me? Am I really this bad of a person? I mean, I was really analyzing it from all fronts, and I also felt very ashamed about my own story. In fact, a lot of close friends going back to high school had no idea about my story because I actually felt that if they knew that they wouldn't want me to. So, again, my abandonment and all of that was very deeply rooted. So I remember one day I walked into the counselor's office at my high school and I just said, I need to talk. And at 15 years old, that was sort of my beginning into, I would say, therapy, which then, of course, transitioned over to an adoption proficient therapist, right? Because there is a difference, right? So,
Yes.
oh, there certainly is. But I certainly recognized that I needed to talk to somebody. And yeah, and I started at a young age. I also think, too, that sort of spawned from the fact that my parents were always very open and honest about my story, and it wasn't taboo in my home. So it just kind of left a bit of an open door for me to really explore my own feelings and my thoughts. Yeah, and then of course that kind of led into turning 18 years old, and I figured, okay, I'm going to start searching. And I thought, wow, I'm going to, write to the ministry and get my file, and I'm going to go back to Prince Rupert and do a article in a newspaper, and I'm going to find them. Boom, boom, done. Oh yeah, I had it all figured out. Didn't really work out that way. Certainly, I wrote in for my file, and my file was missing. Certainly, I did media in Prince Rupert, and I got nothing. And then I even, at the time, I first reached out to the RCMP because, of course, I had recognized that, abandoning a child is a criminal offense. So clearly they must have my file. I mean, not only is it a criminal offense, but I was a minor and it's unsolved. Well, sure enough, they came back to me and said, no, your file's lost. We don't know where it is. And by the way, we're not in the business of matchmaking. Yeah, it was actually quite insulting. So anyways, I mean, what do you do when you have nothing, right? So for me, I just figured, okay, well, I have to go on with my life. I continue to just, build my career, and I had my family, but always in the background, my search was there. I would always say to people, some people would golf every Saturday, right? I would search for my biological parents. So, I certainly had to treat it almost sort of like a project, no different than something like with work, because I could see that it would be very easy to get very obsessive about it. But I had nothing to obsess about it because I never really had any leads. I had no names. I had nothing. So what do you do with that? I mean, you bang your head against the wall and you hope for a different result every time, right? So, however, I did, all along the way through my search, I, did everything. I mean, I did newspapers, magazines. I did just tons of stuff. I was on TV, radio. I mean, you name it. Yeah, so a few years into my search, I did a newspaper article in the Prince Rupert Daily News, and it was just, again, a regular story. I mean, I had already done a few. And I went to my mailbox one day and I opened it. And it was a letter from the editor. And he wrote me the letter and he attached a newspaper story of another woman that was also abandoned in Prince Rupert, and she was also searching. And he wrote it and said, "Hey, look at the headline. I just published this last week. This woman saw your newspaper article and she thought that she would copy your same tactic of using media to try to find her biological parents." So sure enough, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the picture of her and I'm looking at her name and this and that. And, sure enough, she was born also the same town I was born in, Prince Rupert. She was also abandoned in the same town I was abandoned in. And it would have been enough time for her to be a half sibling because she was abandoned and born in early 1976. And I was fall of 77. So, of course, I contacted the editor and I said, "Well, I really need her contact info. Like, I can't believe it's another foundling. Like, I just genuinely wanted to talk to her and just basically talk shop and say, 'Hey, wow, I'm a foundling. You're a foundling. Wow, like, isn't this wild?'" Well, anyways, he couldn't give me her contact info, but he did say that he passed it on many times and she never called me back. Now, of course, did I try to find her? I did, but oh, geez, I tell you, Haley, this is just like my search this is just how my search went. Even the newspaper didn't even spell her name correctly. So I'm trying to find somebody with an incorrectly spelled name. And of course it was. It's just like, are you kidding me? I just couldn't believe it. So for many years, I held on to her newspaper story. And I always kind of wondered, wow, this just seems so strange. But I just kept searching and I kept wondering. And, as Facebook grew, I would plunk her name into there. But of course, it was misspelled. So, I had nothing to go on. So, many years went by. I kept searching. I kept working with my therapist. Being a foundling, I think, brings up sort of this sort of deeper, I would say, almost sort of trauma and loss. Because, okay, yes, I can relate to many adoptees without a doubt, but knowing that you, yourself, your body was actually just left somewhere, right? It's this whole other layer of the onion that is so painful. It's to say that, in many ways, you were never given sort of that dignity and respect to go through the proper channels of adoption or to be birthed in a safe place in a hospital or, so there's all these other layers to my own loss that I really felt I had to uncover and discover and then really ultimately understand why I was who I was and find a way to turn that around and live a really happy life, right?
Mm.
So I have to say, in many ways, I do look at how long my search took. It was 21 years, but being in the body that I am today, I kind of think to myself, wow, all those years in the background that I worked on myself and I worked on my loss really actually prepared me for the unthinkable, right? So I kind of go between those two worlds of, wow, okay, I was so glad to actually be a bit more prepared, but also sad that I missed out many years with a lot of family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then April of 2016, I figured, okay, just again, like I'd always do, okay, well, I'll do another newspaper article in the province and
That's a BC
BC
newspaper.
newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And then again, everything else. I mean, all the news stations jump on board, radio, everything, you name it, right? And honestly, I even remember it going, well, gee whiz, I guess I may as well just try again. I had no real hope that I would have, find anything or anybody would step forward, right? However, though, on April 28th of 2016, I got an email from this gentleman named Ted Lofto. And he actually was my social worker that placed me in Prince Rupert with my adoptive parents. And so we spoke on the phone, and he said, "Hey, Janet, I don't want to alarm you, and I don't have any real proof or evidence, but," he says, "there is a case of a baby boy that was abandoned after you in Prince Rupert." Now, I'm kind of sitting there scratching my head because I said to him, I said, "No, no, no, no. There was a baby girl that was abandoned before me in Prince Rupert. You must clearly be wrong. I mean, there's no way there's three of us, right?" And he says, "No, but Janet, you don't understand. I wasn't even stationed there in Prince Rupert. I know I have the dates right. Fine, yes, maybe it could be a girl or a boy. I believe it really was a boy." And he went on to say that he wanted to tell me this because everybody in his office all thought that we were related. So that I was related to this other abandoned baby boy that was abandoned in 1979 in Prince Rupert. So, I mean, I'm sitting back here going, I mean, what do you even do with that, right? So I didn't do much with it right away, but then I didn't have to. A week later, I get an email from this abandoned baby boy because he had a friend that heard me on CBC radio, and he emailed me and said, "We have a similar story." Anyways, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was just jumping up and down going, oh my goodness, what in the world, right?
It's the first connection that you've actually made, right?
Yes. Oh, totally, totally. So we spoke on the phone, and, you almost can't quite believe. It's kind of like, are you kidding me that we were both abandoned by the same mother? And I mean, I was just still kind of skeptical, going, I'm not so sure about this. So I went on to ask him about health issues. I mean, I've always been fairly healthy. However, I had a condition with my teeth when I was younger. And so it required a lot of surgery and different things of that nature and stuff, and a lot of orthodontic work. So I asked him about his health, and what does he end up saying? Well, he too had the same issue with his teeth. And so I'm just kind of going, are you kidding me? Because it's very rare. And so I said to him, okay, I think we have to DNA test. But again, I'm very analytical, right? And I didn't want to go ahead and spend his money for him, to do the DNA testing. And so I researched percentages and possibilities, and it's so rare. I mean, it's like 0.03% of the population have this, right? So the very next day, we agreed, and I went through Canadian DNA testing. They are a private DNA company. And so what we did is we did a test that was a full versus half siblingship test. And it came back a week later that we were definitely half siblings. So he was my first confirmed biological family member. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, okay, we got two babies now, right? So I'm going, okay, wow. I relished in the moment. I was just so ecstatic. I mean, I was crying, laughing. I just couldn't believe it. It's just like, are you kidding me? And anyway, so the next day I figured, okay, I have to tell him about this other story about this other woman that was abandoned before me. I figured I'd give him one day. I mean, I was like, well, because actually what I wanted to do was I wanted to tell him as soon as possible, because I really wanted to give him space and time to make the decision too, to also be part of that decision. I actually anticipated that he'd say, okay, Janet, let me think on this for a few weeks or a month. Hey, I'd be totally okay with that, right? Instead, he said, wow, great, let's find her right away. And I'm thinking, are you sure? Are you sure? You're sure? You're sure? And he was like, no, done. Go for it, Janet. Do it, do it. So sure enough, I went to the province newspaper in BC, and I said, okay, you're never going to believe it, but this is who I'm looking for. And sure enough, they ran the story. And that same day, I got a phone call from this woman's ex-husband telling me her full name, her email address, her cell number, her address, her birthday. I mean, just everything. And I thought, wow, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into? So sure enough, I phoned her. She didn't answer it. She thought I was like a telemarketer. I don't know. And so I emailed her. And I mean, these emails are very strange, to say the least. It's like, hey, I heard you were abandoned. And guess what? I was too. And guess what? I just found a half brother that was also abandoned. And guess what? We're half siblings. I mean, so I kept the email very to the point, very professional. And she called me back in 5 minutes. Like it was like boom, boom, done. And again, very similar to his reaction. It was, no, let's do this right away. Let's DNA test right away. So sure enough, we did a private test through Canadian DNA. And again, we did a half versus full siblingship test. And it came back positive that she was our half sibling. So now we're up to 3 of us, all abandoned by the same parent in Prince Rupert. So the dates so far is 76, 77, and 79. So I have to say, for me, sort of how I sort of processed that information was the first half sibling that I found. I actually felt a lot of really positive emotions. It just felt very, I would say, very connective, and it was actually quite happy, and it didn't really fully hit me yet on the magnitude of what really happened for the 2 of us. But when I ended up finding the first baby abandoned, so when we became a sort of this threesome of abandoned babies, that really hit me hard. You know, having 3 as a number was very difficult. Yeah, it was very difficult to swallow. Because then, I don't know, for me, it just sort of turned into a whole other league of, wow, I'm really uncovering something really serious and really dark. Like it felt very dark.
And then what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about searching for the parent that abandoned then? Like, did you waver on that? Were you thinking, I don't know if I want to look anymore?
No, well, I didn't, because again, I'd have to sort of fall back on all those years that I did therapy, in the sense that I was already very resolved that I would probably find out very little about my biological mother and biological father. So much so that I thought, you know what, Janet, you got to count your blessings. If the best you get is a name, and if the best you ever get is maybe a picture or two, you'll be okay. Like I really had such low expectations after searching for 21 years. And of course, with everything missing, my files missing, no one ever stepping forward, it was very obvious to me that my biological mother told no one, which in fact she told no one, right? So I did keep going forward with the search, even though I was feeling that I was uncovering something very dark. I mean, I thought of it all. I thought, wow, was she, are we products of, say, rape? Is this incest? Is she a prostitute? I mean, I thought of it all. But again, I'll go back to all of my pre-work and my therapy. Those were some of the points too in resolving the mystery and resolving my own loss, is, hey, wait a minute, that could be a possibility. So those thoughts weren't the first time I ever had those thoughts. And I also felt as well, and I still feel this today, and that's why I don't use names when I talk about my biological mother, is that my search, my wanting for answers, is because I feel that's right for me. And however, why ever she abandoned me and all my half siblings and this and that and whatever, that's not for me to throw on the front page of a newspaper, right? Like I had some very strict boundaries on that. And that was something for me that I thought, no, that's fine. I still want privacy and this and that anyways, right? So I just kind of felt that, I just had to continue on, and who knows if we'd ever find her. And if we did, we did. And if we didn't, we didn't. And like, I never had any dreams of sitting down with her, having a cup of tea, saying, hi, how was your day? Right? Like, and again, I think that is something that is a little bit different than, say, having a regular adoption, right? And going through sort of normal channels. Again, being abandoned physically is just a whole other realm where you kind of go, yeah, okay. Some of those other hopes and dreams that other people might have from reunion, don't really exist for foundlings. So yeah, basically from this point on, all of us were now half siblings and getting to know each other. And we all agreed that, hey, we'll always keep her identity private and secret. I will say it's sad to say that none of them have held up their bargain of that. So that's been really difficult, that they haven't acted in honesty and integrity. So DNA was a major game changer. I had been on 23andMe and Family Tree DNA and Ancestry, and I was just basically waiting for a hit. Sure enough, the summer of 2016, I got a first cousin match. Absolutely amazing. I mean, that right there was, wow, okay, I've solved it.
Because
Right?
lots of people, they'll find maybe
Mm-hmm.
fourth cousin, third cousin, and then there's a
I
lot of
know.
work still to do after
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you get
Yeah.
first cousin, that's like peak. That's really great.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Oh, no, it's like gold mine. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, it's sort of one of these things where I'm going, okay. So I searched for 21 years. And even by that point, I had probably spent, about $26,000 at that point on searching and traveling and everything. And I'm going, wow, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a first cousin match. Like, okay now, right? So anyway, we spoke pretty much soon after. And actually, one of the first messages, I almost wanted to laugh and cry. Her first message to me was, "Oh, hi, Janet. Great. But guess what? I'm adopted too." And I thought, oh no, are you kidding me? Right? It's like, so for like a whole day or so, I'm hanging on to this going, and I'm like, okay, but that's fine, but still let's talk,
Mm-hmm.
Well, what she neglected to say was, okay, fine, she was adopted, but she actually had an open adoption for many years. So she had a very thick file, a very thick file. And within 24 hours, she sent me everything, like everything. Oh gosh, I just thank her so much for doing that.
Because you've never had a piece of
No,
paper with any info.
nothing.
You've never
No,
had anything.
no, nothing, nothing.
So this is like the first
Yeah.
info. It's not even about you, but it's like
No,
the first
no.
hard copies. Okay.
Oh, totally, totally. So, so I'm looking at this and there are so many pages. I was just going, wow, this is unbelievable. Now, what was even more unbelievable is, especially back in the day, because she was born in the early 80s. I guess the way that adoptions were done sort of back then in BC is, before the adoption order could be granted, the social worker had to show that they had done everything in their power to keep the child in the natural home. So thereby they had to do a lot of family interviews. Well, that was amazing because they interviewed everybody in the family. And there was a lot of family history, everything from addiction to mental health issues. And even my biological mother was interviewed as well. So really, it was a way for the social worker to say, hey, this baby has nowhere to stay in the maternal home. Now, this was sort of one of the pieces where I think a lot of people in searching and reunion can sort of relate to, in the sense of, you start to see these glimmers of, oh, wow, okay, I see what I'm kind of stepping into. Oh, wow, ooh, yikes. And so
Mm-hmm.
literally on the file, I'm reading this in the sense that my first cousin was conceived because her biological mother was a prostitute and a drug addict on the downtown east side. And she had very severe mental illness. So it's sort of those sorts of moments in search and reunion where you're kind of taken aback and you kind of go, okay, and I hate to say it this way, but it's sort of like, wow, what kind of family am I getting myself into? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay. And again, not in a judgmental way, but just, okay, keep your eyes open,
Mm-hmm.
because, wow, something's going to really be revealed here,
Mm-hmm.
And so in the early days with this first cousin, she actually asked me to also find her biological mother at the same time that I was trying to find my biological mother. And I just took that as quite an honor. And I said, yes, absolutely, I will do that for you. So, I mean, again, I've got all these pages. I just start scribbling down, a very loose family tree. I mean, where else do you start? Okay, I got her, and then her mom, and then her siblings, and, on it goes. And it kept coming back to this one woman. And so, of course, I think it's like anybody searching in this day and age. You Google, right? You Google and you Facebook, and I could find nothing on her, nothing on her. And of course, I was like, yeah, not surprised. It's just like my whole search where I get nothing, nothing, nothing. So then I started Googling her siblings, and I ended up finding them on Facebook. And so from there, I just started reaching out to family. But it wasn't that easy because I learned very early on that none of these siblings had any relationship with each other. And I'm not just talking a few years. I'm talking estranged for 20 years, 10 years. I mean, they didn't know who was living, who was dead. They didn't know anything. So I'm kind of going, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Right? So like, again, I'm just like, oh, right. And so, I start telling them sort of my theory about who I think could be my biological mother. And then instantly there's already these sort of themes of a bit of infighting between the siblings. Like, oh no, I bet it was so-and-so because she was a blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure it was the other one because she was, and so it's like, here you are trying to make these phone calls, and you're trying to get these people to sort of speak and talk to you just from a very genuine point of view. And they're already pointing fingers and accusing each other. I mean, so it was very interesting to sort of start walking into this family with that. And, but still, what do you do, right? I mean, I was, in some ways, I felt I was almost there. I kind of just had to continue on. And so I just, again, just like a project at work, I kept it very professional, and I tried to always keep it to the point. And so then that ended up me talking to who would have been my biological mother's husband. So I got his name through other people in the family who, again, they hadn't even talked to in 20 years, 25 years. And I mean, just on it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually found him on Facebook. And, oh, geez, what kind of a conversation is this? Like, hey, so guess what? I think your wife, because at the time I figured they were still married. I didn't know, is my biological mother. And I kept it very just loose on that. I didn't talk about my abandonment at first. I didn't talk about the other babies because it's too overwhelming,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really meant it in that very sincere way, not in a way of, lying or trapping him into a conversation that he didn't want to have, right? And anyways, you know what? I got to hand it to the man. He was very shocked, of course, but he was very kind, and he was very helpful. And I also found out that the day before I actually spoke with him, that my biological mother had passed away.
Mm.
So, yeah, that was pretty devastating. I actually found that out on Facebook. What a place to read it, right? The same day that I found my first cousin's biological mother, who I would have sworn probably would have been deceased based on her mental health and things of that nature. And she was actually doing quite well and living in a mental institution, right? So it was very bittersweet that one day. And yeah, that was very difficult to come so far and be like, wow, okay, she's gone,
I'm
right?
sorry.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I don't say this in a way to sound as though that I'm not honoring my feelings, or I'm not going there. Believe me, I think I'm probably one of the most emotional people I know. But in doing the work and doing the therapy for so long, I don't know, I really didn't have high expectations. And I actually came to learn much later on that she did know that I was searching. And she had about a 2-week period where she cocooned in her room, and she didn't come out because she knew that I was searching. And I would have to say it was very emotional, very high stress for her. It was a very fearful time. and she had a very sudden heart attack and died. So, I also too had to really wrangle around even my own guilt. For many months, I actually thought I killed her. Like I really did, thinking, okay, here I was just searching for answers. I had no idea she had abandoned all these babies. And I actually felt for many months that I had killed her. Like I really did. It was really, really difficult. I know I didn't today, of course. I mean, I do get that, but I know that I guess I would say her decisions in the past, which of course I was one of those, did result in her demise for certain. She couldn't step forward, right? And I certainly know the stress of it just ate her alive, literally. Mm. So, I mean, that was really, geez, I can't even quite tell you. That was really, really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just, when you think about her experiences and just the deep shame she must have carried,
I know.
and
I know. And, and I really tried to get it out in the media. I really thought that I was very dignified and tactful, and I had it out everywhere to say, look, step forward. You email this anonymous email. I had a lawyer set up for a plea deal. I had a counselor set up. I had everything set up for her. So it could be the best possible way of her stepping forward. I even said, look, we don't even have to meet. That's not the point of this for me anyways. Like I just sincerely want to know who made me. I mean, like I just really want to know just the purest form of why I'm living on this planet. Mm-hmm. And, I can't say that she read that or not. I believe she would have. And, but you know what? She just couldn't step forward after all of that. I mean, how do you really explain abandoning so many babies as she did, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, that was really, really difficult. So now here I am talking to her, estranged ex-husband. They had been separated for many years, but they never formally divorced. And he's just thinking, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, and it's like, well, hey, I don't think I am, And so I'm sitting back going, well, how do I actually figure out now? Okay, so this woman has passed away. How do I know that she really is my biological mother? Well, it turns out that they had a son together that they actually kept. And ironically, or maybe not ironically, he was actually born on my 8th birthday. Hmm. I mean, I'd love to say I can make this stuff up, but I can't, Haley. So, yeah, so he was born October 13th on, my 8th birthday. And so the ex-husband said, hey, I can patch you through to him. And, and I really still feel for him to this day. Here he was, this, man in his young 30s, still processing his mother's death. And then he has this woman named Janet phoning saying, hey, wait a minute. Your mother probably abandoned me and these 2 other babies. I mean, he was very shocked, but you know what? He was very kind and he was very respectful. I got to hand it to him. He handled it so gracefully. And he did agree to the DNA testing right away. And so again, we went through Canadian DNA and we did the half versus full siblingship test. And again, it was proven that yes, he was my half sibling. So thereby that makes us to share the same biological mother. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't just end at the 3 of us abandoned either, right? So, okay, great. I've got a last name. I mean, something I've waited for my entire life. Well, I would have to say that a lot of adoptees would take that and run, right? So I'm searching all the different databases and looking through death notices and birth certificates. And I just actually wanted to genuinely figure out who is this woman because nobody else around her knew her. I mean, clearly from all of these babies and this past, right? And so sure enough, I ended up finding a death certificate of a baby that was born in 83. And I'm reading it, and it has her name on it, and you name it. But yeah, it has all this stuff about social services and this and that. And I'm going, gosh, this doesn't make sense. It basically looked like my birth certificate, right? Like, I'm just thinking, what in the world's going on here? So sure enough, I applied for the file. I got it. And actually, they made a mistake and they didn't redact anything. They should have. So I'm going, okay, I'll take it. I'll take the wins.
Yep.
And basically, yeah, it showed that, yes, I have another half sister. Yes, she was born at the hospital. But on the second day, my biological mother just up and left and abandoned her at the hospital. So again, it was like, okay, so now we're up to 4 of us. All right. Now, also, too, I've come to learn who that baby's father is. So that's been an interesting conversation as well. I mean, it's just loss on top of loss on top of loss, right? Now, however, in these files, because she was actually at a hospital with that one baby, she had a geneticist come and meet her and talk to her because the baby had a very rare sort of medical condition. And so the doctor said to her, well, how many pregnancies have you had? Okay, well, this is where it gets interesting. So she admitted to a certain number. And she called us all miscarriages, which I have to say certainly hurt. That stung for quite some time. But she gave a number which meant that there was more babies. So she gave the number of 6. So I'm sitting back here going, okay, well, wait a minute. Right now, we're only at 4. There's only 4 of us babies now. This doesn't make sense. Why would she give the number of 6? So the only thing that I could think of is, this was sort of her way of having these half-truths, right? This sort of way of sort of admitting and having something off her conscience or something. I don't know. So I got some volunteers in Vancouver and I said, hey guys, can you go through all the microfiche in BC? And can you look through this date and this date to see if we can find more abandoned babies in BC? Well, sure enough, we did. And we found a story of this one baby named Kenneth. And he was abandoned in North Vancouver in 1980. Now, of course, I've done a lot of digging on my biological mother. And lo and behold, she lived right around the corner from where the baby was abandoned. And so from a geographical profiling standpoint and how all of us were abandoned and where she lived, it was identical. Now, not only that, but that baby looks identical to me when I was a baby. Like, identical. So anyway, so fast forward, I start asking for files. I want to figure out, is this half sibling or is this baby a half sibling? Where do we go from here? But there's just too many coincidences. I ended up speaking to law enforcement, whereas they said to me, look, they're not going to exhume the baby. Not that I ever asked for that because I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of figure rest in peace. That's fine. But based on the different health conditions that this baby shared with one of my living half siblings that was abandoned, as well as the same health condition that I know my biological mother had, which another baby had. I mean, there's too many coincidences. Even law enforcement said, yeah, we would certainly say that this would be your half sibling without a doubt. So now we're up to 5. Yeah. So is there one more? I still think that there is. I have more volunteers helping me. I also have the librarian at the province going through the microfiche on just, a real needle in the haystack approach. For anybody who's ever looked through microfiche, it can be very difficult to do because your eyes start to gloss over, and I think it can be really easy to miss things. I did get a lead last winter, and I followed that through. I actually thought he was my half sibling. He looked identical to one of my brothers, but it just doesn't add up. So I've let that lead go now. So now I'm sitting back here going, okay, well, there's 5 of us abandoned by the same mother, and there could be one more. So it's just wild, right?
Mm.
It's just wild.
And so of all the babies, she parented one child.
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. So really all in, there's a good chance that she had 7 children total. But so far I've only been able to identify 6 of us, and 5 of us were abandoned. Just like everything else I think I sort of do in life, it's like, well, I got to wrap this up and I have to really validate, is there one more? Right? I mean, could there have been a miscarriage in between all of us? Well, of course there could have been. But why would she give that number? Right? So, yeah, so I do wonder about that. And yeah, I'm hoping soon I'll be able to sort of close the chapter on the search and just say, hey, this is exactly what I know, and move on from searching.
Wow, it's just like, well, you hear this all the time, right? It's just like an unbelievable story. I mean, even
Hmm.
from the foundling world to have so many, it's just wow.
I haven't found a story that's had 5. There is a case of 3 in LA, and I know them and I've talked with them. I'm friends with them on Facebook, and they're lovely people. But 3 is the only one that is as high as close to 5.
Mhm.
So, of course, I'm sitting back here going, okay, great. I've found out all this information, but wait a minute, there's still somebody missing, and that's my biological father. Now, of course, my biological mother is gone, and she didn't say anything to anyone. So I'm already thinking, okay, I'm not going to find him. I really resolved that and thought, no, it's not in the cards. I guess I'll wait and see if I get a match on DNA. But otherwise, I just thought, hey, this isn't going to happen. But then, I don't know about you and how other people who are listening this feel so much about intuition, but I kind of feel that it has to be seen through sometimes. And I kept hearing this one woman's name who apparently was a good friend of my biological mother. And her name is Souza. And her name came up a lot that, oh, they were best friends. They were best friends. They were so close, on it went. And I thought to myself, okay, I got to find this woman, Souza. It's come up too often now. Okay, I just got to talk to her. And I went into the conversation with her in the way that I thought, maybe a woman wouldn't tell her husband of 25 years that, hey, I did all this and this, whatever. But maybe to a girlfriend, she could have said a little more. I don't know. I mean, I just thought, well, hey, I'll just try it. So anyways, I contacted Souza through Facebook. We spoke on the phone, and of course she was so shocked. I mean, she was like, are you
Mm.
kidding me? No way. They were very close. She never saw her pregnant, or so she thought, right? She never knew anything about any of the pregnancies. Everything was hidden. Now, one thing I can say, I'm sure a lot of people are going, okay, well, how can you hide a pregnancy? Well, I'll just say, quite honestly, my biological mother was quite large. I'd say from a young age, looking at photos, she certainly battled with her weight from the time she was 12-ish. So in many ways, she was able to conceal that. Then you throw in the fashion of the 70s with the muumuus. And I mean, it was sort of like, it was like the perfect outfit for her of sorts.
Mm.
So yeah, so sure enough, I talked to this old best friend of hers and she had no idea. But she said to me, Janet, she did live with this man for quite some time. They were in love. It was a very serious, committed relationship. And he was very lovely. He was educated. He was good looking. He came from a really good family. And I thought, wow, this guy sounds fantastic. But then she goes on to say, well, I can't remember his name. And I'm going, oh,
Oh my
geez.
gosh.
I'm going, oh, okay. But then I thought of it, it's like anything in life where you're trying to remember something so hard that you'll never remember it. You kind of have to just let it go.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I said to her, look, Souza, I've been looking for 21 years. Even another year, if it took you a year, I'd still be very grateful. I'd still be very thankful. And she was just thinking, huh? Like really? And I said, trust me, I don't want to put any pressure. Just, let it come to you. So anyways, here she was, and she's an aspiring actress and singer, and she lives in LA, and she was screaming down a highway one night about 2 weeks later, and the name came to her, and she's texting me. She goes, I've got it, but I only have a first name. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. Anything. And so then she went on to tell me that his first name was Emil, Emil. And at first I thought, Emil, I've never even heard of this. What's an Emil? Like, is that a name? Like, does she have this wrong? And then I thought to myself, Janet, if it's him, it's perfect because it's not a Robert or a David or a John. So I thought, okay, I could do this. So I've got a great volunteer. He's actually a lovely friend of mine now. He lives in Prince Rupert, and he's sort of my eyes and ears, so I can always lean on him and say, hey, Robbie, can you search through the microfiche for this? Or, hey, can you search here or there? Because I can't just jump on a plane and do this on my own. I actually did that for pretty much 21 years, right? So finally I had him. And so I said to him, okay, exciting. I've got a name. I want you to go through the high school yearbook because I've heard from him that he actually went to school. He educated the whole bit. Can you find Emil? Just find an Emil. Oh, he found it so easily. He found it in minutes. And I'm just thinking, are you kidding me? Right? Like, it was one of these things where I thought, is too good to be true? He's probably not my father. Like that kind of thing starts to go through your head. So, of course, I've got a name, and his last name was Weinreich. And I Google him, and nothing really came up. And I thought, oh, geez, of course, here we go again. But then I just looked through the phone book, and he was listed. I mean, and I thought again to myself, this doesn't happen to me. Like, I've had 21 years of the same thing, of nothing. Dead ends, silence, right? I remember it would have been last year. It would have been around February. And I'm sitting back with this information on the heels of finding yet another abandoned baby sibling. And my other half siblings at the time weren't doing very well with the news. And there was just a lot of drama going on behind the scenes. And I thought, you know what? I can't call him with this going on. I felt like I had to kind of come into my own with the story and the new revelations. So it was a very counterintuitive thing for me to do because in some ways I was so quick about everything else. But with this, I just said, no, Janet, you want a phone when you're truly present, when you're really able to just go through this process. Because I thought to myself, if he really is my father, I really want to be as present as possible for him and for that experience. I didn't want to go into it with all of this other loss and sadness and chaos and confusion of all the other babies, So I basically sat on it for a couple months. And of course, everyone around me is thinking, okay, this is not like Janet, right? And I just kept saying, no, guys, like, I just have to process this first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just feel like I need to be in a better frame of mind, and I just need to be more settled. And so anyways, the end of April comes along, and I'm looking at the calendar. And again, I'm very calendar minded, and I'm very aware of timing. And I knew I was coming out for a big family party in June. And I had my flights booked, everything. And I thought, okay, Janet, if this guy is your biological father and you've got to do the DNA testing and you still have to find him and this and that, you probably should phone today. Like, don't go into another month. Don't go into May. Phone now. So sure enough, I picked up the phone and I dialed. And I think I misdialed several times over, and I finally let it ring through. I mean, I was shaking. And it wasn't just so much so that I thought this man was my biological father, because, hey, I've got a whole bunch of babies to choose from at this point. I mean, who's to say that Sousa had the timing right and all of that? But I just was so tired of changing people's lives, right? Because here I am, just some random person named Janet, phoning these people saying, hey, guess what? Your sibling did this, or your wife of 25 years did this, or your mother did that. I mean, it gets, for me anyways, I started to feel so responsible for changing realities for people that I didn't take that very lightly. And it really weighed heavy on me, So when I phoned, I was shaking because I was thinking, okay, Janet, here we go again. All right, geez, what am I doing? I'm just going, okay, all right, Janet, the quest for truth, the quest for answers. I'm owed the answers, right? Like I had to sort of give myself this pep talk, right? So sure enough, it rang through. Now I'll back up. Many adoptees probably do this, but there's a bit of a rule book for foundlings. Before we make these phone calls, we already try to identify as many people in the family tree as possible, because when we phone these people and we say, hey, this is what we think we know, a lot of families will say to us, oh, no, no. Oh, no, no. Like abandonment doesn't happen in our family. Oh, that's too shameful. Oh, no, no. And they'll just hang up. Right. And then they block you on Facebook and this and that. And then where do you go with that? So even before I phoned, I already knew with pretty good, probability that, hey, this guy over there is probably my first cousin. And this guy here is probably the uncle. And, so I already had the family tree in place. And thereby I also knew that this man had a wife. So I phone, and sure enough, she answers it. She answers the phone. And I'll never forget it. I thought, oh my gosh, she answered the phone. Damn it. I don't want the wife, I don't want the wife. And it was nothing against her. It was just my own feeling of responsibility that, oh my gosh, okay, here's this woman now. She's not going to sleep tonight. You know what I mean? And I'm going, oh no, oh geez, Janet, what are you doing? And anyway, so sure enough, I did say, is Emil there? And he was away on a job. He was away in Winnipeg or whatever at the time. And so we ended up having this conversation, and I told her who my biological mother was. And she says, oh yeah, Emil dated her. Oh yeah. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And then she's like, oh yeah, they lived together. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is wild, And anyways, around the end of the conversation, she was like, well, why are you phoning? She didn't really fully piece it together. And I also didn't say. And I'll tell you, that's probably one of the hardest things to ever do, is to be on the phone with a stranger, but yet another woman, where you can put yourself in their shoes and have to tell her that, hey, I actually think your husband of all these years could be my biological father. I mean, I wanted to throw up. Oh wow. It was so hard. And she took it very well. She was very surprised, but she says, oh, no, I'll let him know that you called, and you guys should talk, type thing. So then, of course, she tells him, but of course, what does he say? Well, that's not possible. I mean, that would have been in the middle of our relationship, like I would have seen that she was pregnant. I would have seen this. I would have known that. On it goes, And so I also knew that he would doubt it because, of course, finding out everything else that I had found out, I figured, you know what? I'm going to get his email address, which I got from his wife. And I thought, photos are really powerful, right? And so I attached several photos. And here he was, on his computer, typing a message, going, no, I'm going to let her down gently and and say, oh, no, it can't be. And this is why. And he had it all figured out. And then he opens up a picture and sees his daughter. He knew I was his daughter right away. And yeah, he just couldn't stop crying because he had no idea. And not only that, but him and his wife never had children. So I was his only child. So it took him several hours to phone. One of the conversations he had with his wife just before he phoned me was he kept saying to his wife, look, I can't phone. I can't stop crying. Like, I can't call this woman. I can't stop crying. And she said to him, it's okay. You can cry. Like, don't worry about it. You can cry. So sure enough, he phoned me And, oh yeah, every 5 minutes he was crying, I was crying. Even though we hadn't done DNA, and even though I still wanted the DNA done, and obviously still had doubt until I knew for certain, I could feel something with him. Like, I could recognize him. I don't know if you ever had anything like that, but I knew his voice. I sort of knew the cadence in his voice. I just knew all these things about him. It was really, really interesting. So sure enough, we agreed to DNA testing. We actually did a legal paternity test. And sure enough, there's no doubt. Yeah, I'm his daughter. It came back like 99.999.
It's a girl.
Yeah, it's a girl. It's a girl. Yeah, so sure enough, of course, we're, so excited. And it was an interesting thing for him because he really is by nature a very private person, very quiet and private. But of course, the story now is so public because it's been so public for so long. And I kept his identity quiet for quite some time. And finally, he just said to me, Janet, he says, you know what? I have nothing to hide. I've done nothing wrong. I'm happy to go out and say exactly how, what I know or what I don't know. And so now he's very much out in the public eye, and, he lets me talk about him, and, and he's very humble, and he kind of rolls his eyes, and he's like, oh, Janet, and so we've certainly worked those sort of things out. And he just says, oh, say whatever you want, how you want. And it's all great now. Right. So anyway, so certainly, yes, we met, and, meeting for the first time was, oh, geez. It was just unbelievable. Yeah. Definitely for the first day that we were together, we just sobbed and sobbed for most of the first day. And it was an everything sob. It was the loss. It was the joy and the elation. It was just everything. It was everything all mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
Even still confusion and, wow, this is so surreal. And him looking at me, and, us being able to touch each other. It's, it's pretty unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to pause you right there. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And this is really special because Janet has asked both of her dads to come and share with us. So we're going to get to hear their perspectives of what reunion has shifted for their relationships and all that. I can't imagine thinking you don't have a kid for ever, and then surprise, I have an adult daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of big things. Yes. Okay. So we're going to just say pause. And when we come back, we will get to talk with Janet and her dads. If you would like to connect with Janet, I would encourage you to go over to her website, janetweinreich-keall.com, and she has links to all her social media profiles there. She's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and links to those will also be on our show notes at adopteeson.com. As I said, next week we are going to be talking with Janet and both of her dads. It is a really incredible conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. I felt like I was on sacred space while they were talking with each other, and it was just a really, really beautiful time we had together. It's so infrequent that we hear from fathers, and I just think it's so important. So make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you like to listen. If you need a link for that, adopteeson.com/subscribe has links to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find a link for that there. And as always, I want to say a giant thank you to my monthly supporters. If it wasn't for you guys, I would not be able to keep producing this podcast for you. So if you've ever found the show valuable, if you have learned something from it, if you think it's as valuable as going to therapy, I'd love for you to join my team and become a monthly supporter. Adopteeson.com/partner has details for that. Thanks for listening. Let's talk again next Friday when we wrap up season 4 with Janet and both of her dads.